In this video, I'm going to be talking about reported speech, which is also called indirect speech. You may see this if you're studying noun clauses or if you are studying quoted direct speech. This is a really important thing for people to learn. There are many times in conversation, in speaking, in writing, where you need to express what somebody else said. This is really common. We talk a lot about other people. So it's good to know the basics of this, and this will give you the basic ideas of what you need to know. So we are looking at changing from quoted speech with the quotation marks, also called direct speech, to reported or indirect speech, meaning somebody else says later what that person said. So take a look at the first one. The doctor said, lose some weight. The doctor told me to lose some weight. This one is a little bit special because this is an imperative. It's a command telling somebody to do something. Notice I just used the verb telling. We most commonly use told when you are telling an imperative, a command. It's possible to use other verbs, but I'm really going to stick with what is the most common. I really believe when you're learning a language, you need to really stick with the most common way to say things. Too often I see students trying things that are very uncommon and saying, but the book says, and it really doesn't work well. So, most common is to use told, but when you use told, you need to have a person. Told me, told him, told her, told Uncle John. You don't use to. It's just told me. The doctor told me to lose some weight. What happened here? We changed from a command to an infinitive. Infinitive is to plus the base form. A command is a base form. So all you need to do here is just add the to, right? All right. The rest of these are not imperatives. These are using, what we say, other regular verb tenses. Heidi said, I want to go to lunch. Heidi said that she wanted to go to lunch. What did we change here? Quite a lot of things that we changed. I mean, of course, we changed the punctuation. You take out the comma, you take out the quotation marks. So there's no comma here in reported speech. Heidi said that. This is not required. It is good for more formal or academic speech, but it is not necessary. Very often in speaking, people will take it out. Heidi said, she, we have to change the pronoun. You can't say Heidi said that I, because it's not Jeanie, it's Heidi. So Heidi said that she. What about the verb? We're changing from simple present to simple past. She wanted to go to lunch. We don't change the infinitive. You just change the main verb. What about the next one? Gita said, it's raining too hard to go out. Gita said that, again, not necessary, said, it was raining too hard to go out. We don't need to change the it. How did we change the verb? Present progressive to the past progressive. What's happening here? If you can figure this out, we're taking the verb and we're moving it one step back. You might have studied this before if you did hypothetical conditionals. It's mostly the same concept. You take the verb one step back. This does not necessarily mean that the idea is in the past. This is very confusing for many people studying when we change one step back. We do not think about these as past tense. We think about them as reported speech of the present tense. Does that make sense? So when we say, Heidi said that she wanted to go to lunch, we understand that as being the same time that she said it, right? So it is possible that it could still be true. Maybe she said this 10 minutes ago. I say, hey guys, let's go to lunch because, 10 minutes ago Heidi said she wanted to go to lunch. And it's almost time that the cafeteria will close. So it could still be present. I know a lot of grammar books tell you that if the situation is still present, you don't need to change the verb. Yes, that's true. You don't need to change the verb, but you can. So if you're unsure, should I change the verb or not? Just change it because you can do that. You can go one step back. It doesn't mean that the idea is past. It means it's the same time as the speaking. Okay. So, last one here. I'll call you tomorrow, Gregory promised. Gregory promised that he would call me the next day. All right, now I'm using a different verb here instead of said. I'm using promise. You can do that if you're talking about a promise. You can use other verbs like admit or confide. But again, most common is using said or told. All right, notice with said, there's no person, right? No said me, don't do it. Told me, said. Okay, promised that, again, this is optional. Promised that he, so I changes to he, will changes to would. If you have studied some regular modal verb changes, that should be familiar to you, will to would. Call, you changes to me, and what about tomorrow? If I say this on the same day, then tomorrow is still good. But if I say this after this day, I need to change. Tomorrow is no longer tomorrow. I have to say the next day. So, lots of things you have to think about. You have to think about using a reporting verb, say or tell with a person. We didn't talk about verbs here because, questions. That gets into more issues, so we'll do that on a different video. But if you use ask for a question, you may use a person after it, but it's not required. You can also use, there's lots of other verbs you can use to express ideas, but most common. Verb from direct speech changes one step back. Over here, I have the listing of how this works. If you look over here, what pattern do you see? It should be clear that the present changes to the past every time. Simple past or past progressive, the past changes to past perfect. What about past perfect? Past perfect progressive. They're at the end of the line. There's no place to step back to. They can't do anything. No change. Will to would. Am, are, is going to, was, were going to. If you have studied hypothetical conditionals, you might have learned that were is the common form and not was, but this is different. You can use was and were. Can to could, may to might. This one is not as common, but still it's used. Must, if you are talking about a requirement. We don't use this very much in American English. But if somebody used must as a requirement, you must stay in your seat, then it changes to had to. She told us we had to stay in our seat. An imperative to infinitive. That's this right here. All right, then you need to change anything that changes reference of time, location, person. So pronouns you have to be careful of, and possessive adjectives. Words of time, instead of saying tomorrow, you say the next day. Instead of saying next week, I'll call you next week. She said that she would call me the next week. The makes a difference. We need it. It makes a difference. Next week would be the direct speech. The next week, indirect. You can also say the following week, the following month, the following year. This is more academic, more formal. If you're going backwards, yesterday. If it's not the same yesterday anymore, you need to say the day before, the week before, the month before, or the previous day, the previous week, the previous month. This is more academic. If it's the same day, today, if you're saying today, then in indirect speech, you would say that day. Gregory said he would call me that day, but he didn't. So that morning, that afternoon. And words like here, there, this, that, think about them. Is this still this? If it's not, you have to change to that if you're not with it anymore, right? So these are the basic principles that you want to keep in mind using indirect speech. I recommend that you practice it. Listen to what people are saying when they report what somebody else said. When they say, my mom said that, or my uncle told me that, think about how they're making changes. And then listen to people speaking in the supermarket or to you or on TV, and think how you would change it in indirect speech. It's a good idea to just practice pieces here and there. Get used to it. And I wish you the best using your reported speech.